In Schoology, learning objectives can be either state standards or custom-made standards that you use to measure your goals and objectives for the courses that you're teaching. Schoology offers a way to organize a lot of different content, a lot of different technology, and various types of assignments in one place. Schoology allows students a variety of ways to submit their work to demonstrate their understanding, and it also does create a lot easier workflows for you to grade and evaluate work while also providing feedback and allowing for iteration. On top of all that, you can sync things over to your gradebook, and your gradebook will sync your rosters over to your classes, so that's something you no longer need to manage. Another tool that's very, very useful is what's known as a learning objective. And a learning objective could be a state standard, it could be a school standard or a student learning outcome, or it could be a goal or something that you like to accomplish for your class. These learning objectives can be built into rubrics, they can be attached to assignments, and free of charge and above and beyond everything else, Schoology allows you a way to monitor how students are performing with the goals that you have for your class. So to get started, we're going to click on Resources. And we're going to go now to Learning Objectives, which are located right here on the left-hand side of the Resources tab. In order to make a new learning objective, you would simply click on Add, and then you can choose one of two things. A custom learning objective is something that you'd like to create for your class. So maybe you have some speaking goals, maybe some reading goals, some writing goals, whatever you'd like them to be, you can create your own. So if I was to create a custom learning objective, I would simply click on Custom Learning Objective, and I can call it whatever I like. Maybe I want to say speaking. The student can effectively work with an audience. And then I would hit Create. When you're writing out your custom learning objectives, make it student-friendly. Make it something that they can understand, something where they know where they stand, and maybe understand the action item or the thing that they're expected to do. If it's really, really dense and a lot of information in it, it's not really super for a feedback loop. So as you notice here too, if I go back to Add, I can go to State Standards, Common Core, and Others. What you'll notice here is you'll see Common Core Standards, which will break it down to the ELA and math. You'll see Next Generation Science Standards, ACTFL, which would be for the world language, as well as State Standards 2 and some other things. If I wanted to go to a Common Core, say English Language Arts Literacy, and keep in mind I was a social science teacher and we teach writing as well, I could go to the grades 9 and 10 writing and history of social studies, science and other technical subjects. I'll then see a strand for literacy and writing, and then I'll see sub-levels yet, and then I can drill down to a specific level. You'll also notice that as I progressed, I have more and more breadcrumbs where I can go to the next level up if I need to. And if I'd like to select more than one, I can do that, and I can choose to add these as well to my learning objectives. Now, when you do this, notice that you can't edit them. You can't rewrite the verbiage in something that would make more sense for a student. Whereas with the custom ones, you notice it has a little pencil in the middle. You can edit, and you can refine and do what you'd like to do. For our purposes, I'd recommend that your custom learning objectives are just that, custom, because you can access them, the written published ones, in a different way in just a moment. So keeping in mind when you write your learning objectives, keep it simple, keep it student-friendly, and make it specifically action-oriented so that way a student knows what to do and how to make it right if you're looking at an iterative process. Schoology, and we learned about the idea of making custom learning objectives as well as accessing pre-published learning objectives. It's important to talk about how you can share and collaborate using these learning objectives. Obviously, when you're learning objectives, hopefully they're things that can be applied across your subject area team. So that way students are getting access to the curriculum and developing those necessary skills for the next steps in their education. So in order to do this, we have some different types of resources. Again, I've clicked on the Resources tab, and I'll see there's some personal resources, which in this case is highlighted. There are public resources, which you can access and search around and find if you like. And there's also group resources. What I'm going to do right now is create a group resource. And what I can do now is click on this little icon to add a resource group. So I'm going to call this Schoology 200. learning objectives. I can choose to set the privacy, access, categories, and a description, but it doesn't matter to me. I just know what it's named. I'll hit create. And now you'll see the Schoology 200 Learn Objectives is already here. If I click on it, it's empty because it's brand new. I could choose to add resources to it. I could also choose to enable learning objectives if I like. I could also go up to this top right-hand corner and click on the View Group Profile. When I do that, I'll be able to add a member manually if I like by clicking on Members, Add Members, or I can provide an access code to my colleague, and that way they can get into it as well. Now, I'm going to go back to my resources and my personal resources, and then finally my learning objectives. I'm going to take the custom ones I created and check both of them, and I'll choose to copy them to a group resource, which is Schoology 200. And when I hit copy now, my colleagues would have access to those if they go to their group resource as well. Now keep in mind, I'm keeping the verbiage simple. I want it student-oriented. I want them to know where they stand, what they need to do. While I really appreciate the complex standards for Common Core and other things, maybe for my students it's not as user-friendly as it can be. So making a custom learning objective can make it more user-friendly, but there may be cases too where I do want to measure against the official standards because there's some important applications to this as well. So in the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about actually how to bring learning objectives into the assignments we have in our Schoology courses. So far, we have created some custom standards. We've brought in a couple of existing standards from the Common Core. And by utilizing the group resources, we've created a Schoology 200 learning objectives that we could share with our colleagues. The most important thing now, of course, is bringing it back to the classes that we teach. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on Courses. I'm going to go on down, in this case, Course B, which is a practice class that I was making and using for the summer. As you see here, I have a couple of sample assignments where I was just experimenting as well and seeing how things work to help build the Schoology 100 and 200 modules that I was a part of. And what I can do now is I can go back after the fact and I can add in some information. So maybe the first phase of Schoology is creating the assignments and finding the formula and the recipe that works for you. And then as you get time to better understand it and collaborate, you can come back later on and add in some of these learning goals and learning objectives, which has some really cool applications. So I didn't make this assignment just now. It's just been sitting around for a while. If I scroll on down, you'll see where it says learning objectives. I can click on a line. And what I can do now is to see a bunch of windows, which are very similar to what I saw in the resources tab. If I were to click on custom learning objectives, I can click on my personal and see the ones I made. So maybe I want to add speaking. I can add it. If I go back to a line again, you also notice that when I was on learning objectives, I could also see the published ones as well. So maybe there is a formal custom Common Core one I'd like to use. I can find the grade level. I can find the strands and the substrands and so on and so forth. And I can add them in too. So there's no need to really recreate the wheel in your custom learning objectives with these existing things. If I'd like to, I could also align it by looking at the custom learning objectives and going to the group. So remember, I had the Schoology 200. It was saved here. Any colleague or co-teacher that I have would have access to everything that we shared over. And they don't have to copy it to their own personal resources. They just access it here. At least this way there's a consistency. So I could add this learning objective as well. Now in this case, I have 4 different things going on. Maybe it's too much. Maybe I want to get rid of this guy. Now I'm down to 3. I can hit Save Changes. At this point now, I'm going to have all the information that I need to be able to save it and have this tied to different learning objectives. To rubrics that I have, which again is a very, very powerful thing. You're getting a lot of bonus goodness with a little bit of setup. What I'm going to do to access my rubrics is go to Grade Setup. I would find my rubric, and of course, I would edit my rubric. So I'm going to go with this essay questions. What I can do now is I can add learning objectives to the rubric itself. I can, again, search through my custom. So I can go to things that are my personal resources. I can go to things that are in my group resources. And that could also be school resources, maybe student learning outcomes or something that you want to measure as well as part of your site. I would simply go ahead and I would find what I want to find and add it. If I'd like to go ahead and add a second one, I can. It's not a problem. I could add that too, and then I would hit save. And what's really cool now is if I use this rubric, anything that I grade is going to be measuring students with these objectives in mind. So you may want to have specific rubrics tied to specific skills or demonstrations of understanding or knowledge or performance. Maybe you want to have some sort of rubric that is tied to some sort of listening, and you're having students interact with a video and then answer questions that are open-ended. You can grade to measure how they're looking at nuance or vocabulary or something like that, or what have you. So it's a really, really powerful tool to have. It's built in. Again, rubrics are shareable within your resources. You can have these things together. And then what this is going to lead to then is some reports that we can get that are really exciting to see how students do over the course of their term. Assignment 1, simple text, and I added some learning objectives. If I click on edit, I'd be able to see them again. In the case of this assignment, I have a Common Core standard, and then I had 2 custom learning objectives that I added into it. In my gradebook, I went ahead and I graded this assignment. I just made up some scores for students. What's really cool is if you go to the far left-hand side, you'll notice a box that says Mastery. And when you click on it, what's going to happen is for the students in your course, it's going to measure how students did on the assignments. And in this case, I have just one assignment that was graded. So you see in this case, all these custom learning goals and the standard learning goals are the same. But if I do multiple assignments and I intersperse different standards or learning objectives into those assignments, what it's going to do is it's going to automatically compile how students did on work that were associated with that learning objective or with that goal. And it will really give me a nice built-in mastery model gradebook that I can use. This is something that's going to be talked about a little bit later on when we talk about some mastery settings, where maybe students can start demonstrating a certain proficiency, and then you move them on to different kinds of curriculum or different kinds of activities because they have those base skills in. And that's why it's important that if you make these learning goals, they're simple and accessible, because that way students can see it and understand what it means. And in a sense of the big picture, they can see how the different types of work and assignment and activities you do with them fit into the bigger goals of the class and also the development of their academic skills. So this will be something that you see a little bit later on with the mastery, but this is where we're going with it. And this is why a learning objective could be a really powerful tool to incorporate with Schoology.